Got my grandpa's World War II hat on. It's not really big enough for my head, but he gave it to me. He fought in the Italian campaign, so maybe I should have mentioned that in the last video. I don't know if I have too much hair or too big of a head. Oh well, we do our best. All right, so you're going to want your notes out again. We're going to talk about Operation Overlord. This is on the bottom of page 9. Okay, so this is June 6, 1944. That's a date you're going to need to know for the test. So put a star by it or whatever you need to do. And take a look at the PowerPoint here. All right, on to D-Day, Operation Overlord. All right, so here are the beaches of Normandy, where the invasion is going to take place, crossing the English Channel. Now, we wanted, so you see this right here, diversion. We wanted the Germans to think we were landing at Calais. See all the German forces here? Because Calais was, across from the cliffs of Dover here, was the shortest distance across the English Channel. We also were trying to deceive the Germans to think that we were going to cross through the North Sea to Norway. So that was part of our subterfuge. Yeah, whatever. Our deception. All right, so this deception was called Operation Fortitude, and we put General George Patton in charge of it because the Germans thought Patton, deservedly so, was our best general. And so when they felt we were going to invade by Calais with Patton as the commander, we had a couple of spies that were spreading misinformation to the Germans, all with the attempt of diverting the German forces away from Normandy, the real target. So you can even see Dunkirk here. Remember Dunkirk from the evacuation from earlier in the war. Okay, so here's Operation Fortitude. Allies made inflatable ships, tanks, boats, planes to fool the Germans. So here's one such inflatable tank, landing craft, plane. Here's one of the spies, Garbo, who was feeding the Germans misinformation. It's actually, the British were really good at capturing German spies and then converting them into British double agents. Here's one of the tanks. It's just always funny to see 4 guys lifting up an American tank. And they move these around, right? They had to move them around so that the German reconnaissance aircraft saw that they were in different spots. Otherwise, it wouldn't have worked. Okay, well, the planning, so we're looking at the planning stage. So part of the planning was deception, and part of the planning was doing a trial run, trying to figure out how to do this amphibious landing stuff. And this picture is of an American tank that was actually dug out of the English Channel from one of the exercises to prepare for D-Day. So that exercise was called Exercise Tiger. It was on April 28, 1944. And what happened was we were trying to simulate what it would be like to land on the beaches of Normandy, and German E-boats, we called them, the Germans called them Schnellboats, which means fast boat, came and attacked us during our exercise, and they estimate around 800 died from these German E-boat attacks. And so this tank sunk as a result of the attacks, and then it wasn't found until decades later, 40 years later, by a British hotel owner and fisherman. And this mess up, Exercise Tiger, was top secret. No one knew that we had lost over 800 men in an exercise preparing for D-Day, because we didn't want anyone to know that we were planning an invasion. So in our newspapers in May of 1944 couldn't say we lost 800 men in a training exercise when attacked by the Germans, preparing for an invasion of France, because that would clue the Germans in that we were going to invade France, and we couldn't let them know that. So this was kept secret. Some people didn't know that their sons died in this exercise until over 40 years later, when this tank was pulled up out of the channel and was actually recognized that this tragedy had happened. So we were really nervous about a real invasion, just because of how many things had gone wrong in our exercises, including Exercise Tiger. Here's a picture of a German Schnell boat. All right, another part to the planning was the Atlantic Wall. So we actually intercepted a message from the Japanese, who were, remember, allies of the Germans, telling us, well, it was the Japanese talking about the German Atlantic Wall. They had actually, some of their representatives actually seen it. The Atlantic Wall was the German defenses protecting against American assault. And the Japanese had made a comment saying that at Normandy was a weak spot in the Atlantic Wall. Well, we intercepted that message and deciphered it, and then determined that that's where we wanted to attack. So, that was a key point. We also picked Normandy because it was close to certain ports in England where it would be easy to stockpile men, equipment, tanks, etc. for the invasion. And then the other thing that went into the planning was the weather. We needed the tide to be low so that ships could see mines and other obstructions. And we needed a full moon so that our paratroopers, who were going to parachute in at night, the night before the invasion, could see enough to find landing zones, etc. And so only a few days each month were suitable because of tide and moon phase for the invasion. So they originally had picked June 5, but the weather was not good. The seas were too rough for the landing craft, so they called it, and then they ended up choosing June 6, and the weather still didn't look great, but they thought they could make it work. What we're looking at here, another part of the invasion was this Pointe du Hoc, it's called, spelled Hoc, H-O-C, but pronounced Ho, I think. So here's an aerial picture of the cliffs around Pointe du Hoc. So here's a monument right here that you can visit. And what happened was Army Rangers, American Army Rangers, had to scale these cliffs to try to knock out German gun emplacements, German artillery guns that could launch shells onto the invasion beaches. So these Rangers went out in advance very early in the morning to try to scale these cliffs. So I have a little piece from Ronald Reagan, President Ronald Reagan, talking about that. So hold on while I find the video. Okay.
The air was dense with smoke and the cries of men, and the air was filled with the crack of rifle fire and the roar of cannon. At dawn on the morning of the 6th of June, 1944, 225 Rangers jumped off the British landing craft and ran to the bottom of these cliffs. Their mission was one of the most difficult and daring of the invasion: to climb these sheer and desolate cliffs and take out the enemy guns. The Allies had been told that some of the mightiest of these guns were here, and they would be trained on the beaches to stop the Allied advance. The Rangers looked up and saw the enemy soldiers, the edge of the cliffs, shooting down at them with machine guns and throwing grenades, and the American Rangers began to climb. They shot rope ladders over the face of these cliffs and began to pull themselves up. When one Ranger fell, another would take his place. When one rope was cut, a Ranger would grab another and begin his climb again. They climbed, shot back, and held their footing. Soon, one by one, the Rangers pulled themselves over the top, and in seizing the firm land at the top of these cliffs, they began to seize back the continent of Europe. 225 came here. After 2 days of fighting, only 90 could still bear arms. Behind me is a memorial that symbolizes the Ranger daggers that were thrust into the top of these cliffs. And before me are the men who put them there. These are the boys of Pointe du Hoc. These are the men who took the cliffs. These are the champions who helped free a continent. These are the heroes who helped end a war.
Okay. I went to Pointe du Hoc years ago, so I'll show you that pictures from that in just a minute, as soon as I share the right screen. Hopefully this is working. So this slide is actually on the D-Day beach. So I'm kind of talking about these together. Says, for these men are lately drawn from the waves of peace. They fight not for the lust of conquest. They fight to end conquest. They fight to liberate. They yearn but for the end of battle, for their return to the haven of home. So here's a panoramic view of Pointe du Hoc, looking out at the, I guess, the English Channel. There's the monument way over here. So here's a German concrete bunker as part of the Atlantic Wall defenses. This is the entrance to it on the back side, the side facing away from the water. And so this is inside of a bunker looking out over the water. So you can see where the machine gun placements would be up against that concrete ledge. So here's, you can see this opening here in this German bunker facing the ocean where they would put their gun placements. And then this is obviously the cliff that the Rangers had to come up. So there's that monument that President Reagan was standing in front of. So here's another, this is outside of the museum on the D-Day beaches. If we ever proof were needed that we fought not fought for a cause and not for a conquest, it could be found in these cemeteries. Here was our only conquest. All we asked was enough soil in which to bury our gallant dead. So this is looking from the top of the hill overlooking the D-Day beaches. So you see just, it's kind of hard to feel. I mean, obviously these are people on the beaches way down here, how far away that is, but also how high it is. So obviously the Germans had this high ground and they could just rain down artillery, mortars, machine gun fire onto the men and ships coming in on the beaches. So last time I was there, I actually grabbed this soil. Show you that in a second. Off of the D-Day Omaha Beach. So there were 5 beaches. The Americans most famously were at Omaha Beach. So here's sand I took as a souvenir from Omaha Beach. You can still go down and walk on the beach. Okay. And then here's another view of Omaha Beach. This is inside of the D-Day cemetery. So you see the white crosses, of course, and then the well-manicured trees and reflection pool. And then inside this little pavilion here is actually huge kind of paintings or murals on the wall that kind of discuss the D-Day landings, giant maps that you could look at. So the last time I was there, a few years ago, I wanted to find Theodore Roosevelt Jr.'s grave. He died shortly after the D-Day invasion, but he won the Medal of Honor. So it says this is his official citation for winning the Medal of Honor. So this, of course, is President Teddy Roosevelt's son. So he asked to lead an assault, and he landed with the first wave. It says he repeatedly led groups from the beach over the seawall and established them inland. His valor, courage, and presence in the very front of the attack, and his complete unconcern at being under heavy fire inspired the troops to heights of enthusiasm and self-sacrifice, etc. And so for that, he won the Medal of Honor. See how he is GP entitled Rough Rider after, no doubt, his father, who was called a Rough Rider in the Spanish-American War. So here is his gravestone marker at the D-Day cemetery, and you see it's in gold. So most crosses aren't. So this is his brother Quinton's, who died, remember, in World War I, and they moved his body to the D-Day cemetery. So they're buried next to each other now. And this section of the cemetery was actually closed when I went there, so I had to sneak through this barrier and so I could get a picture, because one of the big things I wanted to look at was their gravestones. And you see he died July 12, 1944. So about a month after D-Day. He actually died of a heart attack, I believe. So not a combat wound. This is inside of a shrine. I don't know if that's the right word. A chapel. That's a better word. A chapel in the D-Day cemetery area, right in the center. And so you can go in there, and it's a very solemn place, thinking of those who died in 1944 to free France. So that's a picture of another cemetery in nearby. This is a British cemetery. And then this is at the center of that British cemetery. And all these wreaths were put there because this was in 2014, I guess. So that was the 70th anniversary of the D-Day landings. So big dignitaries like former President Obama and Prime Minister of England, etc., had come and laid wreaths commemorating the D-Day invasion. And we were there just a week or two after June 6th. So the wreaths were all still there, and so we got to see that when we were there. Okay, so switch back. So there again is the aerial view of Pointe du Hoc. And then, so here's Eisenhower's words to the 101st Airborne. You can see their patch here of the eagle, the screaming eagle, before they would leave to parachute behind enemy lines. And that's kind of an interesting ordeal too, because they parachuted at night with the help of the full moon, and many of them missed their landing zones. So they're scattered all over the place, trying to regroup behind enemy lines, encountering Germans at night. They had these little crickets, they called them, to communicate with each other so they would know who was friend and who was foe without actually speaking. And very heroic of the 101st Airborne to parachute behind enemy lines. A lot of men were lost in that. They got stuck up in trees with their parachutes, got killed by the Germans behind lines. It was a very brave, courageous endeavor. So here's a picture. This is obviously not D-Day morning itself, but it was in the maybe, I don't know exactly when it was taken, but either later, most likely the days after, when they were this became a major port, the D-Day beaches, to land all of our supplies. So these are all transports, most of them are, and these kind of balloon dooflickies here were to stop German strafing runs from their Air Force, which, by the way, was mostly knocked out by this point. And so you see the bulldozers and trucks and tanks all pouring onto the beach to push back the German lines. And so this is where we were pumping in all of our supplies and men days after the original D-Day invasion. Interestingly, Eisenhower, who was the supreme commander of the Allied forces, wrote this note in case D-Day failed. He says, our landings in the Cherbourg-Havre area have failed to gain a satisfactory foothold, and I have withdrawn the troops. My decision to attack at this time and place was based on the best information available. The troops, the air, and the Navy did all that bravery and devotion duty could do. If any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, it is mine alone. So he signed July 5, but we know it was written on June 5. So just kind of an error in the, you know, all of his things that were on his mind. He just messed up the date in the bottom of the note. Although, of course, D-Day was a success. Okay, I wanted to show you a couple other things here. So this map's kind of neat. It goes through the whole war. So if we start at the beginning here, through the whole war, the like who has what. So this is right after the war started. You see the Germans control, Russian control, and then Allies. So France hasn't fallen yet. So you see the movement over here with the USSR. Okay, now the invasion of Norway and Denmark. Soon thereafter, Belgium and the Netherlands, and then into France. My goodness. So it's all 1940, obviously, a year of great importance in the war. So now I'm going to skip ahead to D-Day. So here's May of 44. So you can see the Americans advancing up in Italy. So that's the Anzio Casino battles. So now D-Day has happened. We've just started over, but it's not, see, notice it's not until August that we gain a significant foothold. And you see how the USSR is taking back land? Right, so by September, we're back through France and we're on the edge of Germany. And at this point, people are like, well, we will probably end the war by Christmas. But of course, that's not going to happen. So this is a pretty interesting video to show how the Axis powers took over and then the Allies fighting back. Okay, and then I was going to show one other thing. gotta find it, sorry. Maybe I shouldn't have so many tabs open. Just kidding. You know me, I always have lots of tabs open. Okay. So this is from the History Channel, but this little video right here is pretty good, just an intro clip. This is of D-Day, by the way.
The following communique has just been issued by Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force. Under the command of General Eisenhower, Allied naval forces, supported by strong air forces, began landing Allied armies this morning.
So you can see all these like structures here made out of a lot of times wood. That was what the Germans built to protect their beaches, so that when we landed things, tanks, etc., that we couldn't get through there. So first they had to blow those away and create avenues for our trucks and tanks to get up on the beaches and our landing craft to get up to the beach. The British actually developed a tank that could go through the water with a propeller and then have tracks to go on land, and then diffuse mines for that purpose. And we called them weird names because we thought they were really unusual.
On the northern coast of France.
Just incredible.
People of Western Europe, the hour of your liberation is approaching. All patriots, men and women, young and old, have a part to play in the achievement of final victory. This landing is but the opening phase of the campaign in Western Europe. Great battles lie ahead. I call upon all who love freedom to stand with us now. Keep your faith staunch. Our arms are resolute. Together we shall achieve victory.
All right, well, obviously this is not ideal, but hopefully you learned a thing or two about D-Day through this video and how we prepared for it, how we executed the fight, how important it was that we had cleared the air of the Luftwaffe in the previous years by bombing German factories. And remember, Mr. Ash talked about all the different men who died going over Germany on these bombing raids, all for this culminating achievement of invading France against the German defenses and pushing them back eventually into Germany itself. So this was our foothold, this invasion of Western Europe, and we can thank God that it was successful. And hopefully you have a better sense of what that was like from this video.